Avoid fraternizing with people who don't share your values. Prolonged association with those with false ideas can only tarnish your thinking. Epictetus. There was this rich celebrity named Rick who was really famous and on top of the world. He was a dancer, and he created a popular dance move that went viral globally. He had a childhood friend called Steve who was also a dancer but wasn't as popular. Rick was always the life of the party, the guy who was always cheerful, smiling, and fun to be around. No matter where he went to, no matter the occasion, he always looked happy. There was even a particular time that he got robbed and lost a lot of his valuables. It still didn't shake his happiness. After some months, Rick started changing. He was always looking sad in any of the pictures taken by paparazzi. Many of his fans started comparing his pictures from 2 months versus now. What's the problem? Many of his fans wondered. The happy Rick of before is now the downtrodden Rick of today. He stopped posting anything on his socials and even stopped dancing. He looked like the energy in him had been sucked out of him and life drained out of his body. But nobody knew why, not even him himself. But maybe some did. It didn't take long before some people started looking into his friend Steve and also started studying his behavior. He was so toxic and influenced Rick's life negatively. His actions drove Rick to the lowest point of his life and almost made him give up. The Stoic approach to toxic people was to stay away from them and find their own peace. Maybe it was too late for Rick to get back to his lively self. Maybe it wasn't. That's a topic for another day. But if Rick was any bit interested in Stoicism, there are traits that Stoic philosophers have warned us about that toxic people definitely exhibit. And he would have noticed them in Steve, and he could have easily stayed away from him before it became too late. Rick's case shouldn't be the same for you. That's why this video is a must-watch, as it would show you 9 traits of toxic people Stoicism already warned us about. Firstly, negative people. There are always people who are negative about everything they are involved in. Steve was that type of person. Whenever he made a dance video, he always talked about how he knows it would never go viral. His negativity even got worse after Rick's video blew. He practically gave up on becoming great and was always sad and depressed. You could say, but that does not affect Rick. His own video went viral, and he is not the one being depressed and tired of trying. As someone once said, you are the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. No matter how hard you try, the behavior of those you move with will always extend to you, and before you know, you could start mirroring them unconsciously. This is particularly what affected Rick. He became negative and started questioning himself, wondering what would become of him after the viral dance stops trending. He kept telling himself he can't create another new dance step that could go that viral. He wasn't always that negative, but Steve's behavior had affected him unknowingly. Like Seneca said, we are more frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most of the things we worry about are simply a figment of our imagination. Most of them are even yet to happen, but we are already breaking down over it. Like I pointed out earlier, that Rick stopped posting on his social media platform. He never even formed a new dance step, posted it, and saw if it would trend again or not. His thoughts overwhelmed him. You should never let that happen to you too. When we move around with negative people all the time, no matter how positive we ourselves might be, it still affects us. You start worrying about things you shouldn't worry about. You start panicking over events that are yet to come. Marcus Aurelius talked about the best way to deal with the negative people around you. Firstly, you have to observe all the negative traits from their character and remove them from your own character. Then you have to stay away from them. Steve was a negative person, but Rick didn't realize the dangers in Steve's character, and it affected him. The second trait that you can notice in most toxic people is complaining. This is even closely related to negativity, but I decided to note it separately, as sometimes people who complain all the time might be positive. But when something bad eventually happens, they never look to solve it or move on and go again. They sit and whine and complain about an event they can no longer change. How does it help to make troubles heavier by bemoaning them? Seneca. It is normal to face troubles at some point in life, but how you react to it is what really matters. Some people hold on to their troubles, and it thus amplifies. Just like his obvious negativity, Steve complained a lot to Rick, talking about how his dance videos can't go as viral as Rick's. He kept saying he is just as good as Rick in dancing, but Rick is now famous. But he isn't. He never thought to find out what he is particularly doing wrong. He just kept complaining and complaining. Toxic. People like that who are quick to complain about situations shouldn't be around you. The best thing to do is to limit your exposure to them, and if you can't, because you have to see them at work or at home, then mentally distance yourself from such people. They can affect you and your thinking. Soon you will find yourself complaining about some things too, instead of finding solutions to them. If you're stuck in a negative situation, be the person to add some good and make it better. If you find yourself complaining about something, think about what you can do to make the situation better. You have to look at your adversity instead of complaining about it. Take responsibility for your growth and move on. The Stoics never had time to complain about things or about others because they are focused on the many things they can improve on in themselves. When Confucius heard that a fellow philosopher was complaining about one of their peers, he replied, "What a worthy man that Zigong must be! As for me, I hardly have time for this." Also in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius's most popular book, he spoke about this over and over again. Look inward, not outward. Don't complain. Don't meddle in the affairs of others. Another toxic trait that Rick failed to notice in Steve was jealousy, number 3. When you look at the traits I have mentioned so far, you would see how closely related they are and how toxic people could never hide one or the other because it always comes out anyway. While complaining, Steve showed his jealousy for Rick by saying he is just as good as Rick in dancing, but not as famous. That's being jealous. He never sought to ask how Rick made it to that height and maybe emulate it. He was just bothered about why it was Rick and not him. The more important thing is noticing this trait, observing it and seeing it is not a one-time thing but their actual character, and staying away from them before they bring you down. You have to avoid people like this and make sure they do not have access to you. To quote Oliver Stone, "Never underestimate the power of jealousy and the power of envy to destroy. Never underestimate that." Marcus Aurelius referred to jealousy as something that can make you dance like a puppet. Jealousy can leave you saying and doing things you can never dream of saying or doing with a sound mind. We don't even know everything, so we can never tell if Steve did something to Rick, because the power of jealousy can make people do anything, and Steve was jealous. Remember, avoid jealous people and never give them the chance to bring you down. The 4th toxic trait of people that Stoicism has shown us already is manipulation. The tactic known as manipulation is used to control or force someone to do something against their better judgment, or something we don't normally want them to do. Whether on purpose or not, we have all been guilty of manipulating one another at some point. However, there are certain people who are extremely controlling and manipulative. They are experts at deceit, and we should learn to avoid these toxic individuals. There are a lot of them around, even more than you can imagine, and you might even be currently manipulated and not know. For example, in Rick and Steve's case, Steve was always making Rick do things for him, like buy his dinner, pay some of his bills, because he was the richer friend. Rick always did it, but he never noticed that his generosity was getting taken advantage of. Like Ryan James said, when we allow another to alter our thinking, it can take a long time to return to our previous reality. That's the awesome power of manipulation. When manipulative people who want to use you for their own gains are around you, you need to run. They never let you fulfill your own desires and goals. They only keep you around for their own needs. It is a shame that many people usually learn about avoiding manipulators from experience. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Epictetus. You can control those around you, and if you see someone is using you for his own gains, stay away from such people. Live your life with authenticity, stand up for your own values, and stay strong and in control. The fifth trait of toxic people is how they victimize themselves. Steve was someone who always did this. He always blamed his lack of fame on some external forces beyond his control. He always ranted about how he is just as good as Rick at dancing, but Rick got famous by luck and he himself is never lucky. Although some people truly face genuine hardship and troubles out of their control, people that are not trying to play the victim will always try to find a solution to these hardships. The victim will make this a permanent excuse and not make any move to become better and overcome the problem they are facing. You might even find yourself blamed in the storyline, and that's how they get you entangled in their woes. If the person is a manipulator too, he makes you think the problem is yours too, and that's how he starts bringing you down with himself. Or it can also make you adopt the same victim mindset in your own trials too. Many of the Stoics dealt with hardship that the likes of our pampered generation can never face. Death of their own children, being born into slavery, getting exiled for their viewpoints being crippled, being sentenced to death, and so on. Epictetus once said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them." This is a man who spent his childhood as a Roman slave. He was born into slavery, and he was never caught blaming his fortunes on ill luck or something. Instead, he celebrated his life, penned the remarkable Enchiridion, and went on to become one of the most popular and sought-after Stoic philosophers of all time. People of our age need to be more like him and stop victimizing themselves. And when you come across someone like this, do not try to be a savior. Stay away. Number 6, the ego-driven. In a society that frequently promotes the development of our egos, Stoicism provides us with a powerful counterbalance. It serves as a reminder that, if allowed to go amok, our ego can turn into a devouring force that drives us from our inner tranquility and serenity. In a culture that values self-advertisement, the Stoics point use in the direction of living a humble life. People that are caught up in the relentless pursuit of constant approval, external validation, and recognition are dangerous. They feel they are better than you and wouldn't help you thrive, and even worse, if you move with people like that, you could become like them. Do things that feed your soul, not your ego, and you will be happy. To quote Ryan Holiday, ego tells us what we want to hear when we want to hear it, but it is a short-term fix with a long-term consequence. Do not feed your ego, and if someone does that, it is always better to stay away from them, since they would be focused on gaining from you and making themselves them, and not letting you thrive. The 7th trait of toxic people that Stoicism warned us about is the trouble magnet. There are just some types of people who always find themselves in one trouble or the other no matter what they do. They mostly behave irrationally and end up in deep shit. They are always battling one crisis or controversy, and when you move around with people like this, they always tend to suck you into their own cesspool of problems. Dealing with people like this, especially if they are a friend of yours, is always so tricky because they often make the problem feel like your own. It is so infectious that you might even find yourself battling conflicts that you had no initial part in. To avoid people like this, you have to become selectively unavailable. Stoicism reminds us to value our time highly, and sometimes it might just mean being unavailable for other people's crisis, especially if they keep getting into different troubles. It's okay to help out a friend in need, but if such a friend is always in need or in trouble and needs your help, then that friend is a trouble magnet and you know what to do. Make sure you create time for yourself when you can focus on just yourself and you wouldn't be disturbed. This can be particularly helpful when dealing with drama magnets. You even get to concentrate on yourself more and not be anxious of what next trouble your friend could put you in. The 8th trait of toxic people that you need to know is time snatching. Let me explain what I mean first. Imagine you have a friend who is always needing you to do something for him or her, or always needs you to follow him to one occasion or the other, without regard for your own schedule or plans for the day. That's a time snatcher. He or she might not even be doing it intentionally, and you might be always happy to help. But it always affects you in ways you wouldn't know until later. You would always later find out that things you should have done many days ago are just being attended to because you had to follow your friend to a night party that you do not care about. Staying away or avoiding such a person might be harsh, but there are other ways to not allow a time snatcher to suck your energy and take away your time. You have to be strict and stay true to the plans you have made for the day. Always doing what a time snatcher wants is closely related to being manipulated, so you know what to do to avoid being used all the time. It is okay to go when you are free, but don't make it all the time, and do not go when you have other things to do. You have to create boundaries, stick to your schedule and stay true to it. Seneca once wrote that it's not that we don't have enough time, rather we use the time we have wastefully. The amount of time we have is completely and utterly out of our control, to be honest. But the way we spend our time remains ours. We have to treat time as something of utmost value, as it is actually our most valuable resource, and never let anyone snatch that from you. The last toxic trait that I will be pointing out to you today is impulsiveness. Many people do things without forethought. They do before they think, and their life is mostly filled with daily regret. The impulsive desire for things is abundant. It is the ability to master and control the desire that is scarce. In a world filled with people without self-control, Stoicism guides us like a lighthouse of wisdom and self-control. It calls for thoughtful deliberation and deliberate avoidance of hasty decisions based solely on emotion. The impulsive is often at the mercy of their impulses. If you move around people like that, they can hurt you and make decisions that will affect you gravely without thinking. You have to limit your exposure to people like that and emulate Marcus Aurelius, who championed the idea that our choices should align with our values and long-term goals, rather than be swayed by momentary whims and desires. The impulsive may find temporary relief by doing things based on their emotions, but it never lasts long. The Stoics take a step back and reflect on all the factors present before making any choices. The more you embrace Stoic principles, the more you stay away from toxicity. Maybe if Rick knew all these beforehand, maybe he would have been able to stop Steve from sucking out his energy and making him become just like him. Now that you know all these, it is wiser to be observant about these traits in other people too, and not end up like Rick. As we reach the end of the 9 traits of toxic people that Stoicism already warned us about, and everybody should definitely know, let's not forget that self-awareness is more important. Many people would start looking for these in other people without realizing that they are guilty of these same traits themselves. It is easy to find these in others, but harder to find in ourselves. Are you playing one of these roles in someone else's life? Then you know you need to find a way to stop doing that and become better. Stoicism is about improving ourselves too. Thank you. That will be all for today. If you found this video entertaining and helpful, do not forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as it serves as a source of motivation to keep making videos like this for you. Also make sure to hit the notification bell so you can be the first person to know when a new video drops. See you again soon.